So good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Reverend Dr. Ron Fox, and welcome to our Sunday morning service. This morning, when I get done with the introduction, Reverend Jenna is going to begin with a prayer and a spiritual reading, and then we'll be listening to my message. But before we get to Reverend Jenna, I just want to start the way we always do and say, if you've never been to a Center for Spiritual Living before, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you, no matter what your divine path is. And the Center for Spiritual Living Space Coast is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles, whoever you are, and wherever you find yourself on your journey of faith, you're welcome here.
Okay. So if you just maybe close your eyes and settle in and take a nice deep breath of life and let it go. And in this calmness, in this peace, let us know and recognize that there is one universal life force, a life force which some call God, Spirit, the Absolute. This divine energy is the source and substance of all that is, and it breathes its life into each and every one of us. And with every breath we take, we feel the energy and the life force of that spirit living itself through us. I give thanks for this moment, this sacred, special moment in time where we come together as a community of love, support, companionship, friendship, laughter. I give thanks for each and every person participating in this moment. For I know that our energy expands in wholeness and love and peace. And that wholeness expands beyond our community, outward, further and further, till it encases this whole world, bringing that love, companionship, peace, joy to all who can resonate with it. And I know as we go into this morning, Reverend Dr. Ron Fox is enlivened by that spirit, by that energy, that life force which moves and breathes through his very beingness, knowing that he is invited and motivated, inspired to speak words that resonate with each and every one of us in a way dear and near to our hearts. I know that he is led, he is inspired, he is gifted, he is wise, because Spirit moves in, as, and through him. I give thanks for this moment, and I let it be, and so it is.
And so it is.
So my reading today is from Alan Cohen from a book called A Deep Breath of Life, and the title is called Prayer Conditioned. At the orientation of a week-long spiritual conference at a Pennsylvania college, one of the 500 participants raised her hand and asked, "When are we going to get our dorm room keys?" The sponsor answered, "We don't give out keys. The entire campus is prayer conditioned. We have done conferences here for over 10 years. We have never issued a key, and we have never had a theft or loss. The consciousness we bring to any activity creates a psychic environment that protects or undermines what we do in that field. Prayer works. Holding an activity in prayer or a prayerful attitude will draw to it a wealth of support, energy, and protection. Scientific studies have shown that praying over food changes the food's chemical properties, and that hospital patients who receive prayer treatment recover faster than control groups. In Russia, I visited a church where an icon of the Virgin Mary had been venerated during the plague. The plague took a grueling toll on the entire region, except for the town that had prayed for intervention, which miraculously remained untouched. When undertaking any significant enterprise or relationship, or when facing a challenge, make prayer your first line of support. It will help you far more than fear or worldly manipulation.
Thank you. So good morning again. The title of my message today is Meeting Life's Challenges. And so I know some of you know what Becky and my week was like, but there may be some that are watching this later that don't know. And so last week, one day I got a text from one of our practitioners that her husband had COVID-19. And about a day and a half later, she texted me that he had died. The next day, she texted me that she and her son had the virus. That same day, which was Tuesday, we were having our normal Zoom call at 2:00 on Tuesday, and there was a storm brewing. And all of a sudden, my wife and I heard the loudest noise maybe we've ever heard. And what it was, our condo got hit by lightning, and it fried my computer, it fried our cable box, our DVD player, our smoke alarm went off, and our condo smelled of smoke. Luckily, there was no fire, and we got the cable box back eventually from Spectrum, but I did lose my computer, and we lost our DVD player. And I'll just say that right now I just heard from our practitioner this morning, and she is doing better, as is her son. And in addition to all of that, the same night that or maybe the next night that all of this happened, I got a call from somebody else who needed surgery, who asked me not to say what's going on. So it was a really difficult week for Becky and I. The fear that what could have been, and emotionally, friends going through what they were going through. So that's why I chose to speak on meeting life's challenges. So Rabbi Harold Kushner, who wrote the book Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People, in one of his other books, he talks about when life turns out to be less friendly than we had hoped it would be. And he says, so what do? Do we give up? Do we gripe about God and how unfair life is? Or do we look into ourselves and discover how deeply resilient we are? And he says, when life deals you a painful blow, take the time to let it hurt, and then trust yourself to get over it. So I want to give you two examples of what he's talking about. And one of them was an example he gave. And so there was a young girl in his congregation, 16 years old, that found out that she had juvenile diabetes. And it really threw her for a loop, because it meant for her a lifetime of medication and injecting herself. And what really got to her was it made her different from her friends. You know how when you're in high school, that's the last thing that you want. And so he did some counseling with her, and he said to her, this is unfair. You really don't deserve this, but don't let this one thing define you. All the rest of you operates really well. So try to keep this in perspective as you go through life and deal with it. And he said she went on in high school to become an honor student. And it's 30 years later when he was writing this. And he said now she's a wife, she's a mother, she's a real estate broker, and she's a leader in her community. That's what he meant by going within and feeling how resilient you are. And let me give you another example. There's a woman who had survived in her life many, many health challenges, including many operations. And she got cancer, and she survived that too. But she went to see a counselor, and when she did, she was depressed and she was incapacitated. She worked with the counselor for a while, and she got through it. And she was actually leading a really joyful and wonderful life with her husband. And then one day her jaw hurt, and she went to the dentist, and he said, "You need a root canal." And she got up and she walked out of his office. When her husband came home that night, he found her in her bathrobe, totally, totally depressed. And she said to him, she told him what went on, and she said, "You know, this is the last straw." So we called up the counselor, and they went to see the counselor. And she started to take the counselor through all of her life's illnesses and all of the surgeries she had, one after the other, after the other. And the counselor, in her mind, in her logical mind, said, "I wonder what this is doing for her. Why is she doing this?" Until all of a sudden, this woman broke out in laughter, and she said, "Root canal, schmoot canal. I can do this with my hands tied behind my back." And what it is, when she was going through all of this, she was able to look at her woundedness, and she was able to see her strength. She was able to see her power. She was able to see her will to live, and her courage, and her ability to heal herself. And the counselor, Rachel Remen, said, "Perhaps every victim is a survivor who just doesn't know it yet." You know, one of the things, I think probably I say this a lot, but it's the truth. We are always at choice. And we have the choice that we can react or we can respond. And one of the things that makes us feel better when we choose to respond is we get to choose how we're going to deal with what's happening in our life rather than an immediate emotional reaction. We get to make the choice. So I want to give you a quote from somebody that will give you your money's worth of this talk. To me, this is what this is about. And when I read this talk, it really bowled me over. In fact, I shared it with one of our congregants, Jude, and it's by somebody named Carl Gustav. And what he said is, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." So I read an article this week by somebody named Ralph Marston, who said that challenge keeps us focused on what matters to us. And he said, imagine a world with no challenges, that there would be no need for any effort. If every wish that you ever wanted, boom, happened like that, as soon as you thought of that, it would soon get really old. It would be an empty world. The value in achievement is overcoming challenges and in growing as a person. Getting the reward without the effort is no reward at all. It's the challenges, even though they can be painful, even though they can be difficult, and even though they can be demanding, yet they bring about in our life a richness and a fullness that we wouldn't have if they weren't a part of our life and who we are. So Rabbi Irwin Kulit talks about this too in one of his books, and he says, In fact, I talked about this last week, that life isn't a straight line, but a lot of us try to make it into a straight line. Well, we want all the happy times to last, to think that our life is going to work out just the way we expect it to, and just the way we want it to. But that doesn't happen. And so he tells a story about being out with his wife one night at a friend's house for dinner. And his wife is 9 months pregnant. And she leans over and says to him, "I think it's time." So they get up, and the hospital where she was going to go is nearby, and they walk to the hospital. And she gives birth. And the baby is a perfect child, a perfect baby. And they both cry tears of joy. And then he has a thought, he said, that knocks the wind out of him. And the thought he had is that just about exactly a year before, his wife had a miscarriage. And if she hadn't had that miscarriage, this baby wouldn't be in the world. And he said, in that moment, he was filled with sadness and he was filled with peace. He said the terror of that moment and also the gratitude of that moment. And he said he understood then why Jewish people have the practice of saying a blessing when something good happens and when something bad happens. Dennis Merritt Jones asks the question, when in your life did you suffer the most? And he says, it's probably when something you wanted to stay was in the process of going, or when something you wanted to go wasn't ready to move out of your life yet. And he said, change happens, and expect uncertainty to be a part of your life. Nothing lasts forever. And the sooner we learn this, the less we suffer. And then he writes about a Native American saying that I'm sure a lot of you have heard. And that is, you can't stand in the same river twice. And the reason is, the river isn't the riverbank. The river is the water that's flowing by the riverbank. And it's always flowing forward. And water is the spiritual symbol for life. And life is always moving forward. And to resist is to choose suffering. Ernest Holmes tells us what we are outwardly and what we are becoming depends on what we're thinking. So I thought when I was thinking about this message, I thought one of the ways that could be helpful to people is if I could talk about how we can deal when we have challenges in our life. What can we do? How can we deal with them? So I want to give you 8 thoughts on how we can do that. And the first one is another one I'm sure I talk about a lot, but it's at the heart of spiritual practice, and that is to surrender. And I know surrendering is really tough, and I know my wife over here really knows surrendering isn't tough. But when we surrender, we turn it over to a higher power. Wayne Dyer says when we do that, we treat spirit as the senior power in our life. And it's a way of walking with God rather than walking alone. And let me give you an example I read this week that really touched me. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote that when she was doing counseling with a young boy who was dying, she asked him to draw a picture of himself. And he drew a picture of himself as a tiny little figure with a huge cannonball about to strike him. And when she saw the picture, she knew that he hadn't gotten to a place of peace yet. So she spent more time with him. And after a while, he accepted, he surrendered to what was happening to his body. And she asked him if he would draw another picture of himself. And this time, he drew a picture of himself on the wings of a bird that was flying to heaven. And she knew that he had reached a place of peace. And she said, you know, we find comfort in surrender, knowing that all is well and all is being taken care of. So a second thing we can do to help us get through is to take one day at a time. And I know that sounds trite, but it's something we can do. You know, when bad things happen to us, we worry. How long is this going to last? What is this going to do to my future? How am I going to get beyond this? But the truth is, worry doesn't help. And if we let go of tomorrow's concerns, we reserve our energy for today without siphoning off energy that we're going to need tomorrow. Something else that we can do, a third thing, is to journal. And you know, I love to write, but in all honesty, I'm not a good journaler. But when we're going through a difficult time, if at least then we take the time to journal, what it does for us, it helps us see in a tangible way what's going on. We're able, when we can see it, we're able to think more objectively about the problems and emotions that we're having. And that makes it easier to release the ones that aren't helpful to getting beyond whatever the situation is. A fourth thing we can do is stick to a routine. You know, when something happens that's going on in our life, it often, a curveball makes us feel like we're out of control. And, you know, I think Becky and I could talk about that last week when the smoke alarm is going off and you're smelling smoke and you're wondering, oh my God, did I lose my computer? And whatever, you feel like you're out of control. And having a routine helps. Practicing the same habits is grounding to us. They provide an anchor. So, you know, I know Becky that likes to do yoga. I make the bed every day. Going and working out, whatever it is, having that routine is really helpful. Something else we could do, a fifth thing, is don't go to blame. Blame doesn't help anything. Instead, try to look and ask yourself, what am I being taught here? What's the opportunity for me that's inherent in this problem? The sixth thing we can do, and I think this one's really important, we can take a pause. Don't make a quick decision. Take a moment to adjust whatever it is that's happening. Slow down, take a breath, and deal with it when you're more centered, rather than in the tension of the moment. And a seventh thing that you can do is to reach out for help. Let me tell you what I did last week when we were going through this. I reached out, not necessarily in this order, but I put it in Facebook because I knew that I had enough friends on Facebook that might have some thoughts about the computer or the TV or whatever was going on. I also knew I had friends that would comfort us and do some prayer work. I reached out to our group that prays whenever anybody puts in a prayer request, and almost immediately, 3 of the people sent me back prayers. And then I put it on the minister's listserv. And I wrote everything that was going on and said, boy, this has been a really difficult week. And I sure would appreciate prayers. And we got tons of prayers back. And it was so comforting, not just the prayers, although they were really important, but just the fact that people cared and people embraced us, you know, and to know that there are people in your life that have wisdom and have the experience that might be able to help you. And it's not always the easiest thing to ask for help, but it's something that really is worth it when we do it. And lastly, we can be honest. We can not go into denial and deny that anything is wrong. And don't avoid what you have to deal with. And again, remember, you're not alone. So I want to close with these words from the Bible that I'm sure you'll all remember from the bird song, turn, turn, turn. In everything, there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what we planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. Thank you for being here this morning. I wish you a great week, and God bless you.